Coming up on Lawmakers, Senator Chip Rogers' Georgia Security Immigration Compliance Act is discussed in committee, while House Judiciary takes up Governor Perdue's eminent domain legislation, and the House passes a bill aimed at protecting children from inappropriate internet content. Those stories and more are coming up next.
This is Lawmakers, your source for all the news from under the Gold Dome. Here are your anchors, Gerald Bryant and Nwandi Lawson.
Good evening, everyone. Also on Lawmakers, Senate Majority Leader Tommy Williams leaves the door open for tort reform revisions. And our Tuesday leadership series continues with House Majority Leader Jerry Keene and Minority Leader DuBose Porter. But our lead story tonight, immigration reform gets a hearing. Senator Chip Rogers' immigration bill had its first hearing in committee today. The bill would limit public services and funds to undocumented residents. It's before the Senate Public Safety and Homeland Security Committee this afternoon. Lawmakers Jesse Freeman now joins us live from the Capitol with more on that story. Jesse.
Well, Nwandi, the committee did not vote on SB 529 today, though they did hear over 2 hours of testimony. Much of the debate focused on public funds and access to health care.
Every agency of the state or political subdivision thereof shall verify the lawful presence in the United States of any natural person 18 years of age or older who has applied for state or local public benefits as defined in the federal code or federal public benefits as defined in the federal code. So essentially we're saying every person who applies must verify that they're lawfully, if you're asking for these benefits, these public benefits, you must verify that you're lawfully present.
It is our opinion that it's unconstitutional, unrealistic, and inhumane, and there is no compromise on this bill. And let me tell you why. It's unconstitutional because the federal government is the sole entity that has the ability to regulate immigration.
In this bill, if my clinic is receiving any kind of local or state funds, I'm now in the position of having to create extra documentation, extra paperwork. And someone I could have paid to do nursing or health education is now doing paperwork. So I would ask you not to pass this bill. If you must pass it, I would ask you to delete all references to health from this bill. Finally, if you pass it and there are health references in there, don't ask us to enforce it.
The exemption we've already added is for prenatal care. Obviously, that's because we're talking about the life of an unborn child. I would suggest to you that we also add post-secondary education. And let me suggest to you that we cannot punish young men and women for the sins of their parents.
Now, even after 2 hours, the committee did not hear from all the comments from members of the public who had signed up to speak. Committee Chairman Brian Kemp said there may be more testimony as early as Friday, and the committee may vote on the bill as early as next week. Reporting live, I'm Jesse Freeman for Lawmakers.
Governor Sonny Perdue's eminent domain legislation continues to be examined by the House Judiciary Committee Civil. It passed an enabling resolution needed for a constitutional change, but details of House Bill 1313 continue to be hammered out by the committee. David Zelski now joins us live with the latest. David.
Well, Nwandi, after 2 public hearings in this committee, the committee members themselves decided to discuss proposed changes and draft what Committee Chairman Wendell Willard calls a cleaner amendment.
What we tried to do within this somewhat lengthy memorandum is take a lot of the discussion points that came up to the 2 previous public hearings, as well as information we've received, to try and outline some things that can be of help for committee's consideration as far as potential improvements to the bill. And my intent is to take the bill section by section, and we'll discuss each one, and as we have a discussion on it, be open for changes or amendments to that section. Since we have such a lengthy bill, it'll be a little different than what we normally do.
Now, the committee is expected to vote on House Bill 1313 later this week. The enabling resolution, H.R. 1306, actually passed unanimously. Reporting live, I'm David Zelski for Lawmakers.
In other news, public hearings on sexual offender legislation continued in the Senate Judiciary Committee today. House Bill 1059 would increase the minimum term of imprisonment for certain sexual offenses. However, some of today's speakers voiced concerns about mandatory sentences for juveniles 13 and up.
Youth lack maturity and sound decision-making skills. Second, youth are more vulnerable and susceptible to outside influence and lack control of their environment. And third, An adolescent's character is in the midst of transition and development, meaning they are more amenable to treatment and changes in behavior. With proper supports, 89% of adolescent sex offenders will not reoffend as they mature. The Barton Clinic has been working with committee members to express our concerns about this bill and provide language that would address those concerns. We are here to help in any way we can to create a bill that will both protect children from sexual predators and serve the best interests of Georgia's youth. I thank you for your time and attention and urge you to amend House Bill 1059 to return jurisdiction over youthful sex offenders to the juvenile courts, or at a minimum, to limit the application of the enhanced sentences to offenders who are adults.
Other speakers today talked about convicted sexual offenders being monitored for the rest of their lives. Also, the provisions keeping them from working or living within 1,000 feet of where children congregate. The Senate Judiciary Committee plans to continue public hearings this Thursday.
The House, meanwhile, today passed legislation mirroring federal Internet protections for minors. House Bill 1055 establishes penalties for school districts and public libraries that do not try to prevent children from accessing Internet pornography and other inappropriate material. Representative Mike Keown explained that the bill is intended to promote the establishment of Internet usage policies and software filtering programs.
This act is entitled the Child Internet Protection Act. And this bill simply ties Internet filtering in public schools and libraries to state funding. And basically, the public schools and libraries would have to adopt an acceptable use policy approved by either the Department of Education or by the Board of Regents that would provide for Internet filtering. The good news is today that 100% of our libraries and 100% of our public schools in Georgia are in compliance with federal law. The issue is that we have no state law to back up the federal law, and libraries receive approximately less than 5%, really less than 5% of their overall budget from federal government as it relates to the federal law. So they could choose to opt out and remove filtering if they so desire. This bill simply closes the gate before the cows get out. If somebody opts out of federal law, then they will fall under this state law. Now, this is a good time for this bill. Really, we just want to make a statement that we believe it's important to protect our children, our young people, from Internet pornography.
The measure grants schools and libraries immunity from lawsuit if their Internet filters fail. House Bill 1055 passed 158-0 and now moves to the Senate.
Senate Majority Leader Tommy Williams is leaving the door open to some changes in last year's sweeping tort reform legislation. Today, Senator Williams was asked about pending Senate Bill 232, which states that patients in hospital emergency rooms should have appropriate remedies if they are injured through negligence.
That bill, I think, still has some viability. We're still working with the committee chairman and others to try to make sure that we have that bill right and we have some agreement as the bill moves. But you know, we're not holding the bill at this point in time. We're still considering it. As you know, tort reform is a very complicated issue, and we worked real hard to get tort reform passed last year. I think that most of the Senate believes that gross negligence in the emergency room maybe was an overstep, but you know, when you put a bill like that on the floor, there's opportunity to amend it. We want to make sure that we don't lose ground on some of the other measures. So we're working with parties and working with our chairman of the committee to try to ensure that doesn't happen, but we get a good bill out. So it's not a bill that anyone is particularly holding. We're just trying to get some agreement.
Senate Bill 232 actually made it to the Senate floor last year, but was sent back to the Senate Judiciary Committee. It resides there awaiting action.
A House-Senate Conference Committee continues to work to finalize the supplemental 2006 budget. Earlier, I spoke to House Majority Leader Jerry Keene about the committee's progress.
Well, we just came out of the latest Conference Committee meeting, and I think we made a lot of progress. A lot of the big differences were in the health care area, DHR, and as the budget moves through, when the governor actually does his budget late in the fall of last year, then we get it in the House and the Senate, those numbers can change. And we made great strides in this last meeting and come into agreement on most of the items that we're in disagreement in there. Still out on the table are several smaller items The largest item would be the bond projects, some additional bond projects for the regents that we put in the House. These were items that were passed in the 06 budget last year, but the governor vetoed those bond projects. And then the Senate put a couple of others in from their priority list. So we just talked about that before I walked out of that meeting. I think by this time tomorrow, hopefully we'll have some agreement on those areas, and if that happens, maybe by Thursday we'll have this done.
Okay. Well, of course, you're still working very hard in the House on the 2007 budget as well. Can you give us a status report on where that stands?
We are still doing subcommittee hearings on the 07 budget, and of course the real challenge is you've got the 06 conference going on, and a lot of our subcommittee chairs are involved in that while we're doing the 07. I believe we are getting closer there. We still have a tremendous amount of work to do in 2 or 3 of the areas. Again, health care is always a challenge as we look at those spending limits there. Education is always an area that we have to look at. So we're still probably a week, 10 days away from having a budget that's ready to bring to the full Appropriations Committee for their consideration.
That, of course, being the big item there in the House, but I'm sure that you have others. And since we passed the halfway point, I'm wondering about where the priorities stand. Obviously, you've got the governor's faith-based funding resolution. You've got some other very hot topics that are still out there. Where are some of the priorities right now?
Well, we want to continue to move on the governor's agenda. Obviously, those agenda items that have come to the House, we got the 65% solution out last week, so that's now passed both chambers. The Hope Chest Amendment, which failed in the House, failed in the Senate, we intend to bring that to the House floor for a vote. We certainly believe that the House members deserve a chance to speak on that. Obviously, a constitutional amendment that, along with the faith-based amendment, takes 120 votes, and that means you're going to have bipartisan support. And what I'm hopeful will happen in the House that did not happen in the Senate is that we can work together. If it's a good idea, let's take it to the people, because here's the thing about the constitutional amendments that I think gets lost sometimes. It's up to the voters of Georgia. All we're doing when we vote on those amendments, whether it's the faith-based initiative or the Hope Chest initiative, is saying we believe as a body the voters of Georgia ought to have a right to speak on it. And so we believe, for example, in the Hope Chest Amendment, to making sure that no monies are spent out of the Hope revenue from the lottery except for pre-K and higher ed scholarships. We believe that's common sense, and we believe the citizens of Georgia would vote on it.
The House is expected this week to consider a revision to the state's lending laws, which would remove the interest cap of 300% from title loans. Earlier, House Minority Leader DuBose Porter weighed in with Democratic response to House Bill 864.
The new bill has absolutely no caps on interest rates. So when you had to roll over this loan, right now it's outrageous enough. It's like 600%. There's not even a cap now, which we think is outrageous. Our caucus is opposing this. At the tops, it should be what the industrial loan rate is, but the process is such it's very difficult to amend those kinds of bills because of the rules they implemented in the House. We'll attempt to show those amendments in the Rules Committee, but the version there, I think, again, is not consumer-friendly and tells the real priority of the Republicans who are now in charge. And I'm glad they're putting these out there because the public, I think, is going to react appropriately. They're outrageous.
The class size reduction was something that you outlined as one of your legislative agendas. Does the funding measures that the Republicans have laid out, do those in any way help to ensure that there'll be the class size reductions that you're calling for?
Well, that we've called for. We did K through 3, and for the first time we're seeing positive results from the reading scores in 3rd and 4th graders because of what we've done. Now, I understand that the governor's now coming with a mandated smaller classroom bill, which I can't wait to see. 3 years ago, he introduced the class size averaging that would have revoked what we had done in class size reduction. 2 years ago, he simply postponed it 1 year. Last year, he postponed it 2 years. I think this has been a defining session for us. The Republicans have taken reapportionment. They've tried to rig districts where people have announced. They have made us the most restrictive voting state in the country, where our priorities are on education, health care, job training, open government. We haven't addressed any of those. As a matter of fact, with the governor's 65% mandate that we passed last year, all that does is raise local property taxes. So I think they're helping us define who we really are and what we're for. They've done nothing in education. They've done nothing for teachers. They've done nothing to restore the cuts to the $1.2 billion in cuts to education that have forced over 100 systems to raise property taxes. They've done nothing to address the 75,000 children who have been cut off peach care. Now, they did extend the implementation of the HMO and Medicaid because they knew how the public was going to react to this terrible idea. So I think it's given us a chance to define who we are and show that the good old Georgia conservative Democrat is still around, that we're physically responsible, but we're progressive enough to take care of people in education and health care, where the cuts they've made are just astounding.
For those of you with access to the Internet, you can watch Lawmakers online. Just visit our website at gpb.org for more information. Click on Watch Online, then follow the instructions for watching live or looking at past Lawmakers programs in our archives. That website address again is gpb.org, just another way we keep you apprised of what's going on at the Georgia General Assembly. And we'd like to recommend another website that's a valuable resource for information about the Georgia General Assembly. Go to www.legis.ga.gov. That website is a great research tool we at Lawmakers use on a regular basis. And back to the news. The Senate today agreed with the House to redraw the lines of 8 House districts. Here's Reapportionment Committee Chairman Senator Chip Rogers.
Turn to the first or the second page of your handout that deals with House Districts 5 and 12. It is my understanding that in these 2 districts, the only changes that were made were to take split precincts and put those back together. The total population change was very minor, and if you look at the political data change, it is 0.04% and 0.05%. North Fulton districts, House Districts 46 and 48, I believe, the changes there did involve flipping a couple of precincts, but they were done so based upon the school attendance zones in those particular districts. Of course, both House members agreed, and the changes there were less than 1% in District 46 and an increase of 2.39% in District 48. That would have been the largest increase of any of the changes we're considering today. Also on that same map, you'll see Districts 50 and 51. My understanding in those 2 districts represented by Representative Rice and Representative Burkhalter, the only changes were to take a neighborhood that had been split and put that neighborhood back together.
The chair of the Senate Democratic Caucus said he would be remiss if he didn't point out the Democrats' stance that legislative power to redraw House and Senate lines should be used sparingly.
It's a process that should take place according to the Constitution of the United States once every 10 years, again, not once every year. I know this bill is going to pass, and I realize it's a House measure, not dealing with Senate districts, but again, I think it's very important that we note that here we are again with reapportionment.
House Bill 1137, redrawing 8 House districts, passed 33-21 and goes to the governor.
The House today passed a measure aimed at protecting the eligibility of high school athletes. Representative Chuck Martin explains the significance of House Bill 1241.
A young man, student athlete from Irwin County, was not allowed to complete his high school athletic career because of participation in the U.S. Army All-American football game. This legislation, House Bill 1241, seeks to remedy that situation. It has gone through the subcommittee in education and comes out of full committee with a unanimous recommendation. We've worked with the Georgia High School Association to address the one concern they had about still being able to regulate those events during the season. They are supportive of the legislation.
House Bill 1241 passed without opposition and now moves to the Senate. The House also voted to allow physicians' assistants to accept pharmaceutical samples. Bill sponsor Tom McCall explained that PAs can already dispense the medications. House Bill 832 would allow them to legally receive them. The measure passed 154-0 and it now moves to the Senate. In other House news, Representative Jill Chambers went to the well today to inform House members about the health status of one of their colleagues.
Representative Fran Miller of Dunwoody had a mild heart attack this weekend. He went to the hospital on Friday complaining of chest pain, and they told him it was indigestion, sent him home, went about his business on Saturday, actually went to a meeting on Saturday morning, had the same symptoms later that afternoon. He had surgery Saturday night at St. Joseph's Hospital. They did put a stent in his artery that enters to the back of his heart. The artery was blocked, and this is going to allow the blood flow and the oxygen to get to the heart as needed.
Representative Miller is expected to be released from the hospital within the next 2 days. The House today agreed to expedite vehicle registration for those who have homes in several parts of the state. Representative Joe Wilkerson said that House Bill 1236 was inspired by challenges faced by a former U.S. Attorney General and former Georgia Governor George Busbee.
We found it was a major problem for folks because they were having to drive vehicles back 600 miles round trip and from other parts of the state, from the mountains and so forth. So we put together a bill that we thought addressed it, and it passed this chamber 173-1, and it allowed for local registration of vehicles despite homestead exemption requirements. It did quite well in the Senate, but then the Association of County Tax Commissioners came to us and said that they had some technical problems and asked us to hold it up. So we did, and we've redrawn it with their language, and we've now got a very good bill. Basically what it allows is if you have a second home and you keep a vehicle there, you will pay your ad valorem tax on that vehicle in your home county, but you will be given a form to take back to the county where it's based, and for a fee of $3 to $5 be able to register the car where it's physically located.
That measure passed without opposition and moves to the Senate.
We have additional news now on the marijuana-flavored candy. We told you last week that Senator Vincent Fort has sponsored a bill prohibiting its sale, and Katie Eubanks has more information about public hearings held today regarding that controversial candy.
Senator Vincent Fort's SB 511, which would ban the sale of what Senator Fort calls dope candy, was the topic of a public hearing before the Senate Agriculture and Consumer Affairs Committee.
My bill deals with a subject that I believe is very serious. This dope candy, I believe, is a gateway product to other drugs. It is a candy made with marijuana or derivatives of marijuana.
Senator Fort was careful to point out that dope candy is not just a Metro Atlanta issue, but is also being sold in locations around the state, including Douglas County and Columbus. Lauren Eichstein, the Youth Services Director for Georgia's PTA, also weighed in on the bill.
Children, preteens, and teens often attempt to emulate adult behavior. They will likely view these products as cool and adult-like. There's nothing clever or cool about the taste of marijuana.
Representatives from Georgia's convenience stores and grocery stores associations assured the committee that their members are not selling the candy, but that they support the prohibition of its sale in other venues. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Katie Eubanks.
The Future Farmers of America held their 20th annual FFA legislative breakfast early this morning at the state capitol. The breakfast was held in honor of National FFA Week. Members of the association from high schools throughout Georgia wear their blue and gold jackets as lawmakers encourage the students to participate with the association and recruit more students into the organization.
We talk about leadership in rural development and knowing what a difference it makes in local communities. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know of a better leadership program than the training that you all can get in high school.
It's clear we're going to have to eat, and if we're going to eat, we're going to have new and innovative ways to come up with food. And agriculture education is the key to that.
You're incredible leaders, and we need you to show other young people the way. One of the biggest disappointments we have in education is what happens to young people during those middle school years and in high school. And for too many of them, those years become one of lack of leadership, of not understanding why they're in school, not understanding what's the purpose, not understanding what school and the experiences school can bring them and how that relates to their future. You all get it, and we need you to help us with other young people.
A visit today from the Greek ambassador to the United States allowed Representative Mike Keown to reflect on his own heritage and brought an international travel announcement as well.
101 years ago, my grandfather left the mountains of northern Greece, an area known as Thessaly, and his small village of Athamania to come to America. He brought with him a strong faith in God, a confidence in his own abilities, and a belief in the American dream. I share that same American dream and am proud of what Georgia has done to continue to promote it by supporting 2 world-class seaports, Savannah and Brunswick, and the busiest airport in the world, Hartsfield International. Please join me in welcoming Ambassador Alexandros Malias, the Ambassador of Greece to the United States.
Thank you all. I'm here today to bring to all of you great news. This Olympic capital, Atlanta, will be linked by a non-stop flight as from May 29th to another Olympic capital, Athens, Greece this time. I know that you have a daily flight to Athens, Georgia.
Well, music was in the air today as members of the Villa Rica Middle School and high school bands performed for lawmakers at the state capitol. Here are some examples of their performance. Some inspiring sounds to close out our show. Well, coming up tomorrow on Lawmakers, the Senate is expected to debate legislation that would revamp the state's DUI laws. We'll have that and all the latest from Under the Gold Dome tomorrow night at 7. If you've missed any part of this Lawmakers broadcast, tune in tomorrow morning when Lawmakers repeats at 5:30 a.m. Now stay tuned for Wild Chronicles. That's coming up next here on GPB. And we'd also like to report that cell phone bill allowing cellular customers to change their phone plans without having a long extension to their contracts did get a due pass from a Senate committee today and goes on to the Senate Rules Committee. That is our broadcast for this, the 21st legislative day of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Gerald Bryant.
And I'm Mwandi Lawson. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great evening.
Good night.
This has been a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting.